In the heart of a quaint town lived two friends named Mark and Ethan. Mark was an adventurous spirit, always seeking the thrill of new experiences, while Ethan was his steadfast, more cautious companion. Their friendship blossomed during their college years when they became fraternity brothers and bonded over a shared love of excitement. One warm summer evening, Mark approached Ethan with a twinkle in his eye and a cheeky suggestion. "Hey buddy," Mark grinned. "How would you like to take a night flight in my airplane? I've been itching to show you the city lights from up high. And, hey, you can take a girl with you if you want." Ethan was both intrigued and a little scared at the same time. "You have your own airplane now?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Mark grinned. "Well, it's not really mine. My uncle loaned it to me for a while. It's a beauty, trust me." After a little deliberation, Ethan agreed and they put the plan into action. Ethan invited his friend Sarah, a charming woman he had been dating for some time, to join them on this adventure. Sarah, curious and excited at the prospect, gladly accepted the invitation. The night of the flight came and the three of them gathered at the planned location. The airplane was standing, its sleek metal hull illuminated by the airfield lights. Mark was enthusiastic, and even Ethan couldn't deny the growing excitement in his chest. As the plane soared into the starry sky, the lights of the city stretched out beneath it like a glowing tapestry. Sarah marveled at the breathtaking sight, her eyes reflecting the shimmering cityscape. Mark skillfully maneuvered the plane, guiding it over iconic landmarks and looping among the gleaming skyscrapers. After a while, Mark turned to his companions with a mischievous grin. "Hey, you guys want a little thrill?" he asked. Before Ethan or Sarah could answer, Mark shut off the engine. Suddenly silence enveloped them and the plane began a gradual descent. Panic gripped Ethan, and his heart beat faster. "What the hell? Mark, are you out of your mind?" Ethan shouted through the eerie silence. Mark's laughter rang out as he maneuvered the plane with the precision of an experienced pilot. "Don't worry guys, it's called a bad glide. It's safe, I promise." Ethan clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. He exchanged a concerned look with Sarah, who seemed torn between horror and awe. The minutes dragged on, feeling like an eternity, until finally Mark started the engine. The plane came to life with a roar, the noise a stark contrast to the recent silence. Ethan's relief was palpable, but beneath it was seething anger. He turned to Mark, his voice shaking with suppressed emotion. "That wasn't cool. Man, not at all." In the heart of the sprawling metropolis of Serenova lived Alex and Emily. For months they had been planning a dream vacation in a faraway land, a trip that would take them on an exciting trip around the world. Little did they realize that this trip would be far more adventurous and dangerous than they could have imagined. When the day of their departure arrived, excitement boiled up inside them. They arrived at Serenova International Airport, where a plane was waiting for them, bound for the picturesque country of Eldoria. Golden rays of sunlight illuminated the shiny hull of the plane as they boarded, eagerly anticipating the adventures ahead. The plane's engines roared to life, and with a slight lurch they taxied down the runway, picking up speed until the wheels were off the ground. As they soared through the sky, the world below became a patchwork of greens and blues. It seemed like the perfect start to their vacation, but fate had a different plan. As the plane flew at a comfortable altitude, a distant rumbling sound echoed through the cabin. Suddenly, a fiery explosion erupted on the ground below them. Shock waves swept through the air, and Alex and Emily realized that an enemy tank had been attacked and blown up. Shrapnel flew through the air and hit the lower gearbox of the plane's tail rotor. Panic gripped the cockpit as alarms howled and the plane's controls became unstable. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing that they were having technical problems and needed to make an emergency landing. As the plane descended rapidly, fear and uncertainty filled the air. With their hearts racing, Alex and Emily prepared themselves as the plane descended in a controlled freefall. The pilot skillfully performed an auto-rotation, allowing the plane to plane downward without engine assistance. The ground rushed toward them, and with a jolt, the plane made a rough landing in a remote area of unfamiliar ground. Stunned and shaken, the passengers exited the plane, surveying the wreckage. They found themselves in the midst of rugged terrain, far from civilization. The country they had landed in was known to be territory controlled by a notorious rebel group. It was dangerous land, and now they were stuck in enemy territory. As they looked around, their eyes met with a mixture of fear and determination. They realized that their vacation had taken an unexpected turn, plunging them into a fight for survival. The plane's communications equipment had been damaged and they were cut off from the outside world. Their only option was to embark on a perilous journey through uncharted lands in hopes of finding help or returning home. The quaint town was home to a small but busy airfield. It was the place where dreams of flying were born and aspiring aviators gathered to learn the art of piloting. In the heart of this aviation corner was an unassuming flight school run by an experienced instructor, Captain Sarah Bennett. Captain Bennett was known throughout the airfield for her unwavering composure and teaching skills. With over a decade of experience and nearly 1,000 hours of flying time, she had faced the challenges of the cockpit more than once, but nothing could have prepared her for what was to happen one fateful day. Among her students was a young man named Alex Turner. In Alex's wide-open eyes shone determination. In them was laid the desire to conquer the sky. Sarah understood his desire and took him under her wing, intending to make him an experienced pilot. Days passed into weeks, and Alex made significant progress in his training. They spent hours mastering various maneuvers from gentle turns to complex drops and reentries. But it was during one of these training sessions that their journey took an unexpected turn. It was a clear morning, and the sun was casting a golden glow on the runway. Sarah and Alex climbed into the cockpit of their trusty Cessna 172, ready for another productive training session. With the engine roaring, they taxied onto the runway, anticipation frothing in their veins. Once in the air, they performed the usual maneuvers with practiced ease. However, something went wrong when trying to get out of the stall. In the midst of the stall, fear gripped Alex's heart, forcing him to push the control stick forward and not release it. Panic gripped Alex and he blacked out, unable to realize the consequences of his actions. Sarah's experienced eyes widened in bewilderment as the nose of the airplane slid downward. She quickly took control of the situation, her muscles tensing as she fought Alex's grip on the steering wheel. Her voice was calm and yet demanding to be free of him, but fear gripped him. As the ground seemed to rush toward them, there was a feeling of weightlessness in the cockpit. Sarah's heart was racing, trying to regain control of the situation, the wind roaring in her ears. And then the impossible happened. The horizon shifted beyond vertical, causing their world to flip upside down. Sarah's survival instincts kicked in. Her consciousness shifted into high gear, and in a split second she made a decision that changed the course of events. With a strong elbow strike, she punched Alex in the chest, bringing him out of his paralysis. The impact was enough to break his grip on the rudder and Sarah was able to regain control of the airplane. When the Cessna leveled off, the instructor and student were breathing heavily, their faces pale with shock. Sarah brought the airplane to a safe altitude with her hands confidently on the control levers. She cast a glance at Alex, who was slowly coming to his senses. His wide-open eyes reflected disbelief and gratitude. In the city of Crescentville, the main international airport stood like a gateway to the world. It was a sunny morning, and the runways and terminals of the airport were full of the constant traffic of travelers and airplanes. As the morning sun colored the sky with orange and pink hues, passengers began to board the sleek silver plane bound for a distant tropical paradise. The plane's engines hummed quietly as people walked down the narrow aisle, finding their seats and stowing their carry-on luggage in the compartments overhead. People walked down the aisle of the plane and chatted about their plans, dreams and promises of sun-drenched beaches awaiting them at their destination. Flight attendants moved gracefully up and down the aisle, offering passengers warm smiles and assistance. As the last passengers approached their seats and the flight attendants prepared for a safety demonstration, there was a sudden silence on the plane. A woman's voice came to life on the intercom, interrupting the chatter and waiting. It seemed too early for the usual pre-flight briefings. "Ladies and gentlemen," the voice began, its tone insistent and stern. "Please leave the plane now. Don't take your bags. Just get off the plane. Now, please leave the airplane now." A collective sigh filled the cabin. As the passengers exchanged perplexed looks, what was going on. The crowd of passengers rising from their seats was in a state of utter confusion. Panic and confusion spread like wildfire, with some passengers frantically grabbing their belongings and others simply obeying urgent instructions. The orderly boarding process turned into a chaotic hustle and bustle. As people headed for the exits, questions hovered in the air, but there were few answers. Then, after only a few minutes, a wave of murmuring swept through the crowd. The voice that gave the evacuation command was identified as that of the co-pilot, a woman named Amelia. Rumors began to spread that the cockpit dashboard had caught fire, causing panic among the crew. As the minutes turned into hours, passengers gathered in small groups, sharing stories, reflecting on the cause of the fire and comforting each other, while airport personnel and emergency responders worked tirelessly to ensure the safety of passengers and crew. News began to come in about the extent of the damage to the airplane. Hello. In the quiet town of St. Mary's, there was St. Francis Catholic Grammar School. The heart of the school was Mr. John Anderson, a respected figure known to all as the principal. Each year he organized a grand event for the 8th graders, a week-long educational trip to the heart of American history, Washington, D.C. This tradition was loved by the students and eagerly anticipated by parents and teachers. Before the tragic events of 9/11, air travel was a simpler affair, and students would hop on a plane to get to D.C. This year was no different. The airport buzzed with chattering teenagers, some fidgeting with excitement and others clinging to their parents for comfort. Standing apart among the parents was a group of them, the chaperones on the trip. They shared a mixture of excitement and apprehension, perhaps more than the children themselves. As the plane took to the sky, a sense of camaraderie spread throughout the cabin. The students giggled and exchanged stories, completely unaware that nature had a surprise in store for them. High above the clouds, the sun's rays danced on the airplane's wings, parting the sky. However, as they moved forward, ominous gray clouds began to gather, casting shadows across their path. The plane was caught in a violent thunderstorm, causing the plane to jostle and sway. Anxiety gripped the passengers as the plane continued to move through the inclement weather. Suddenly, blinding lightning struck one of the wing tips. The entire cabin was illuminated with a searing light accompanied by a deafening roar. A collective sigh of fear echoed through the airplane, panic spreading like wildfire. Tears came to the children's eyes, and even the bravest of them felt their hearts hammering. It seemed that their worst fears were coming true. But amidst the chaos and fear, there was one father who seemed to have lost his mind. Instead of trembling with fear, he broke into a fit of hysterical laughter. His mirth was met with incredulous looks and bewilderment from students and adults alike. How could anyone find something to laugh about in such a dire situation? A man's laughter cut through the tension like a ray of sunshine breaking through the storm clouds. It was none other than Mr. Roberts, a quiet and humble figure who now seemed to have lost his mind. It was then that he managed to mutter through his laughter, It's not what you think." As the plane stabilized, Roberts wiped tears of laughter from his eyes and began to explain, his voice still shaking from the fit of mirth. I was a former Air Force pilot. Those little explosions, they're supposed to happen. It creates a fireball, but it's harmless." His words were met with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Some nodded with newfound understanding, while others continued to stare at him in shock. A few hours later, when the storm clouds cleared, the plane landed safely at its destination. In one airport, amidst the constant whirlwind of travelers and destinations, a terrible story occurred that could have caused one death. The story began when a weary traveler named Alex settled into an all-seat on a long-haul plane. The upcoming journey promised not only adventure, but also fatigue. As the hours in the air stretched on, fatigue crept up and his eyes became heavy. In the aisle chair, leaning his head against the window, Alex fell into a deep slumber. But fate had its own way, not knowing what to do with this seemingly ordinary flight. In the midst of peaceful sleep, a sudden jolt shook the airplane, and Alex woke up, confused and disoriented. He saw an outstretched hand a few centimeters from his face. Panic gripped Alex as he realized the impending danger. His heart raced as he realized the situation. A beverage cart, left unattended and unsecured, was hurtling down the aisle toward him. Time seemed to slow down, each heartbeat echoing in the silent urgency of the moment. Fate intervened, however, in the form of a stranger sitting next to Alex. His name was Mark, and at that critical moment his quick reflexes saved a disaster that could have been fatal. With the lightning-fast movement of his hand, Mark grabbed the edge of the cart, stopping its motion a few centimeters from Alex's head. The cart shuddered from his grip, its metal frame shuddering from the force of the momentum. A collective sigh of relief swept through the cabin as the danger passed. The stewardess, with an expression of apology and shock on her face, rushed forward to back up the cart, securing it securely in place. Mark turned to Alex with a wry smile, a mixture of amusement and camaraderie shining in his eyes. "Guess I saved your head, huh?" he muttered, a note of laughter in his voice.